TREB's Chief Market Analyst. Election day is September 20th, and joining me are three candidates running in the federal election. In today's episode, we're talking about housing positions, including supply, affordability, and policies that impact the real estate market. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Ahmed Hassan from the Liberal Party riding in York South Weston. Representing the NDP, we have Simon Topp from the Don Valley East riding. And finally, Amanda Rosenstock, representing the Green Party in Spadina-Fort York. TREB invited candidates running for the Conservative Party and the People's Party of Canada. Unfortunately, both had to withdraw due to last-minute conflicts. Finally, before we jump into our conversation, I want to make clear that I will be strict on timing, allowing each participant equal time to address the issues. So let's start off with 90-second introductions for the candidates running. And we'll start with Ahmed Hassan.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be part of this debate. I'm the Liberal candidate in York Southwestern. Our Liberal housing plan has three broad categories that we're focused on, which is the first one is affordability, measures to really tackle the affordability challenges faced by Canadians. The second one is tackling the challenges around housing supply. And the third is around fairness and rights for all involved in real estate transactions. On affordability, we are the only party that is offering an innovative rent-to-own program. We will be committing $1 billion for rent-to-own programs so that your rent can matter and not just go to landlords. We'll be backing with incentives to, we'll be backing that program with incentives to ensure that folks can who rent properties can move towards home ownership as quickly as possible. We will introduce a new tax-free savings account of up to $40,000, again, to enable first-time home buyers to access their dream of home ownership. We will revamp the existing first-time home buyer incentive program, which we introduced, and we will make it an even better program so that it can serve the needs of first-time home buyers. And we will we will double the first-time home buyer tax credit, as well as lowering overall monthly mortgage payments. So we will do everything that we can to ensure that we're tackling the affordability challenges faced by Canadians so that more and more Canadians than ever before have access to home ownership. On supply, we will be building 1.4 million new units of housing. We will use a $4 billion incentive fund to incentivize the building of more housing by municipalities. We will enable the provision of housing supply.
We're at your 90 seconds.
By offering federal land, and we will also enable nonprofits to access funds to acquire property and land.
Thank you. Next, we have Amanda Rosenstock.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Rosenstock. I'm running to be the next member of Parliament for the Greens in Spadina-Fort York. I'm a new lawyer, and I've served the needs of small businesses across the GTA. Many young Canadians and middle-income Canadians are facing a future where the dream of homeownership is becoming more and more distant. Greens understand that the housing crisis will not be solved without addressing the effect that speculation has on making our housing market more unaffordable. Home prices have gone up 83% since the Liberals took power. And as Greens, we believe that we need to shift away from the paradigm that homes are investment vehicles. Homes are for people to live in, and we must make it tougher for investors to purchase single-family homes so that young and middle-income Canadians are not being priced out of their own communities. Greens understand this crisis, and Greens are willing to take real action to address this crisis. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much. And finally, Simon Topp, please give us your introduction.
Sure thing. Hello, everyone. Like he said, my name is Simon Topp. I'm the NDP candidate for Don Valley East. And I think we should start with the undisputed facts that we all agree with. Canada is in the middle of a housing crisis. Though I think it's important to discuss how we got here, because it tells us what we need to do. For too long, the Liberal and Conservative governments have been asleep at the wheel on housing, leaving it almost completely up to the private sector. We've seen the results. Canada has some of the highest housing prices in the world. In Toronto, basically the only housing being built is for the upper end of the market. So not only is not enough housing being built, but the housing that is being built is nowhere near affordable for most renters. On top of that, the cost of buying a home has almost doubled since 2015, making home ownership almost completely out of reach, especially for young people and new Canadians. On top of that, this country has some of the highest wireless bills in the world, and wages have not kept up with the cost of living. In short, it's too expensive to live in too many parts of this country, with participation in the big city housing market limited to only the country's top earners. That is the result of a market failure due to government neglect. So, what do we need to do? There was a time when the federal government, through the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, took a far more active role in making sure everyone had an affordable, safe place to live. That was until it was significantly reduced by the Paul Martin Liberals, who didn't see the need for our government to be involved. It's time that we ditch that attitude and address this crisis head on. We need to bring in long-term solutions while also providing direct help to people right now. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown that it's time that the representatives of the Canadian people take a more active role in our well-being, and housing is a vital part of that. We should not have people being evicted from their homes during a pandemic in one of the richest countries in the world. I look forward to discussing it with you all today. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much for those introductions, and it's clear that all of your parties have a vital interest in housing, but obviously there's going to be different approaches in terms of how you'll bring more supply online and deal with the various issues of the day. And so with that in mind, I want to turn to our specific conversation topics. And how we set this out is I'll ask a question, and we'll go through each of you in turn with a 1-minute reply. So let's jump right in. And the first question I have is what can the federal government do to help with market-based housing supply issues across the country, both in terms of ownership and rental housing? And we'll go with the same order as we did in the introduction. So I'll turn it over to Ahmed Hassan first for his 1-minute reply.
Thank you very much. I believe that the federal government has a role of providing leadership as well as backing that leadership with resources to incentivize more housing supply across the spectrum of the housing needs of Canadians, whether it is building more temporary and supportive housing, as well as permanent housing solutions to accommodate Canada's homeless population. In addition to that, building deeply affordable housing through the National Housing Strategy, building more affordable rental housing units, but also working closely with municipalities to incentivize the building of more housing supply, period, for families, for middle-class Canadians. And we will do that moving forward with putting forward a $4 billion fund to incentivize municipalities and work with them to overcome barriers and give them the tools that they need to provide more housing supply. We are the only political party that is offering to increase housing supply by an additional 1.4 million homes. That is higher than the Conservatives, and it's higher than the New Democratic Party.
Thank you, Mr. Hassan. And now I'll turn to Amanda Rosenstock from the Green Party.
Yes, thank you, Jason. Look, we have to tackle the crisis at all points along the housing continuum. When it comes to home ownership, we absolutely have to address the role that investment and speculation, not just by foreign investors, but domestic investors as well, the role that that plays in our housing markets. And we can look to other jurisdictions for potential measures when dealing with that. When we're looking at the issue of rental housing and unaffordability, absolutely supply is an issue. There's no doubt we need to bring back tax incentives that incentivize developers to create more purpose-built rentals. The Green Party of Canada is the only party that has a plan to implement a national co-op housing strategy. The federal government needs to re-engage on that front and free up federal lands and put the money up to develop these developments. When it comes to the homelessness crisis, we need to end the ongoing saga of provincial governments not stepping up to the plate and putting up the money for operating costs when it comes to funding the wraparound supports for these units, which means that the federal government needs to take a stronger role in flowing funds directly to municipalities so that they can get more supporting housing units online.
Thank you. And Mr. Top, you'll have the final word on this question.
Much appreciated. So listen, as many people have said, the fundamental thing we need to do to deal with housing supply issues is to build more housing, right? I think that's an undisputed fact. We would do that quickly by cutting GST and HST to developers that want to build affordable housing. That's something that we can do quickly. Also, just to be clear, the Green Party is not the only party with a co-op plan. We are planning to create startup funds to begin the process of building these housing co-ops. We also want to ensure that social housing as well as not-for-profit housing can be built at the same time. This will allow people to navigate through the various systems and have the startup money that they can use to break into the housing market. Also, we believe fundamentally that we should have a housing-first approach to homelessness. It is unreasonable to ask someone to turn their life around before they have a place to stay. So we fundamentally believe in investing heavily in these things. And like we said, we want to just build what needs to be built. However, we also know that people can't wait for several years before they can have a place to stay. So if people are struggling to afford their rent, we believe in direct financial aid so people don't have to become evicted or become homeless. And again, one of the biggest crises of the 21st century.
Thank you very much. And one of the issues I want to drill into in a little bit more detail with this next question is cooperation and collaboration with local and provincial governments. All of you touched on this to a certain degree in your answers, but I think it's worth drilling into in a little bit more detail. And so, from our perspective, some of the most significant barriers to building new housing supply are local and provincial regulations and red tape. So if elected, how will your government work with the provincial, territorial, and municipal governments to address housing affordability? And we'll mix up the order as we go through. So this time we'll start with Amanda Rosenstock.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that has been really brought to the fore is the impact that prohibitive zoning regulations, especially here in Toronto, have on impeding the development of, missing middle type of housing, including townhomes, walk-ups, lower and mid-rise level housing, in 80% of the land, that's within this jurisdiction. And so, we need to try and incentivize municipalities as best as we can to lift those prohibitive zoning restrictions. And if that means, tying a portion of housing infrastructure funding to conditions on lifting some of these restrictions, that's something that we may need to look at.
Thank you very much. And I'll now turn to Simon Top on the same question.
Sure thing. I would actually concur with Mrs. Rosenstock on the idea of zoning and issues like that. But when it comes to working with municipalities, fundamentally, what a lot of these municipalities are missing is funds. They often don't have the ability to build the things they would like to build, often because their only sources of income is from property taxes, which, by the way, contributes to the cost of housing. So we need to be working with these municipalities so they can have a federal partner in building all sorts of things. That includes affordable housing. It also includes infrastructure, and it also includes just general well-being of the citizens that live in their municipalities. So that is fundamentally what we would like to do, have a federal partner with provincial governments and municipal governments.
Thank you very much. And the final word on this question goes to Ahmed Hassan.
Thank you so much. We have demonstrated through programs like the Rapid Housing Initiative, the Canada Housing Benefit, and many other programs that we have found ways to work very collaboratively with provinces and municipalities, Indigenous governments, and local communities. And we will obviously build on that strong foundation of collaboration by introducing an incentive fund of $4 billion to incentivize municipalities to build more housing supply, more mixed housing, more affordable housing, more rent to own. and give them the tools that they need to overcome some of the barriers that you mentioned, including red tape and processing and delays in approvals and so on. We need to increase the supply of housing, and we recognize in the federal government that we don't have all the tools, but we certainly can play a leadership role and provide financial incentives to enable municipalities to also play their part and absolutely continue to work with provinces to make sure that we're delivering real housing supply improvements across the country.
Thank you very much. And, we've talked about collaboration with provincial and territorial and municipal governments and certainly incentives to a certain degree as well. And maybe we can drill down and talk about, one of the key inputs to developing new housing, whether we're talking about market-based housing or forms of assistance housing as well, and that's the need for land. And land costs are often the single biggest factor when we're thinking about improving the economics of housing development. So how would each of your parties, if elected to government, approach the use of public lands to help spur the development of housing? And this time we'll start with Simon Top.
Well, quite frankly, there's a lot of public land that isn't being used for a whole lot. And we think that land should be used to incentivize affordable housing, especially when it comes to housing co-ops and not-for-profit housing and social housing. Those are the projects that can fundamentally lift people out of poverty by giving them a place to stay. And so absolutely, federal public land should go towards those things, especially if it can be done at a lower price to allow people to start up the projects that their community needs.
Thank you very much. And now we'll turn to Ahmed Hassan.
A number of tangible things that we will do. Number one, we will make federal lands available to nonprofit organizations, municipalities, and others to build affordable housing. The second thing we will do is we will empower nonprofits and other housing providers to acquire properties and land, and we will enable them to do so by providing them the necessary resources. That's how you increase supply. That's how you increase the supply of mixed housing. Land is always most often a barrier to the provision and increase of supply of housing, especially affordable housing and housing in general. And we will be putting that into the mix by, again, providing federal lands and enabling folks to acquire land.
Thank you very much. And another key topic when we're thinking about the demand for housing, and especially when we're thinking about affordable housing, is younger people who may be looking to get into the market for the first time. And TREB does consumer polling at the end of each year. And one of the things we found over the last, say, 5 to 6 years is that when you're thinking about intending buyers, people who would like to purchase a home that are going to be looking seriously at that over the next year, between 40 and 50% of intending buyers have been in that first-time buyer category. And so, again, how do your parties intend to support first-time buyers and new Canadians across the country that are struggling to find housing that meets their needs? And this time we'll start with Ahmed Hassan.
Number one, we're the only political party that is offering an innovative rent-to-own program for first-time home buyers. That is a real, realistic, tangible way for folks to have a roadmap to access their dream of home ownership. We're the only political party that is offering a very generous first-time home buyer tax-free savings account to the tune of $40,000, which would, again, help people access home ownership. We're the only political party that has demonstrated the use of the first-time homebuyer incentive, and we will revamp that program to even provide more supports so that more and more Canadians can access their dream of home ownership. By building more, by working with different orders of government, and by putting those incentives in place, we believe more and more Canadians will access their dream of home ownership through the Liberal Housing Plan than any other plan out there.
Thank you very much. And I'll turn to Amanda Rosenstock next on first-time buyers.
Yes, thank you. And I'm really looking forward to hearing how this rent-to-own program proposed by the Liberals is actually going to free up disposable income for renters to actually be able to go on and own a home. So I'm looking forward to hearing that. But But look, I mean, again, when it goes to the issue of first-time home buyers, we do need to deal with the issue of speculation. One of the proposals that the Green Party has is to introduce an empty homes tax. We've seen by some accounts there are up to 66,000 vacant properties in Toronto. We know that speculation and vacancy taxes have worked to put rental units back on the market in Vancouver. In New Zealand, they introduced tougher down payment requirements for investors purchasing non-primary residences. They increased the interest rates for investors. The UK has eliminated financing fees for landlords. These are some of the measures we need to be looking to actually make the cost of housing more affordable, and to give young Canadians and middle income earners a chance to actually get into the housing market.
Thank you. And Simon Topp, we'll let you have the last word on first-time buyers.
Well, so there's a couple things that we can do to directly help people. Right. First, we will reintroduce 30-year terms to Canadian Housing and Mortgage Corporation insured mortgages on entry-level homes for first-time home buyers, which will allow for much smaller monthly payments. We will also double the home buyer's tax credit to help with closing costs. But frankly, I think what we really need to do to ensure that housing is actually affordable is deal with the fact that big money investors are driving up the cost of houses. No one can win a bidding war against investors with deep pockets who are just looking to turn a profit and not build a neighborhood. So to help put an end to speculation that's fueling these high housing prices, we will place a 20% foreign buyers tax on the sale of homes to individuals who aren't Canadian citizens or permanent residents. We will also fight money laundering, which fuels organized crime and also drives up those housing prices we love to talk about. We will work with the provinces to create a public beneficial ownership registry to increase transparency about who owns properties, and we will require reporting of suspicious transactions in order to help find and stop money laundering. Finally, something we want to encourage is co-ownership. We want to make sure that people have easy access to financing by offering CAMHC-backed co-ownership mortgages.
Thank you very much. And the next topic I want to cover, is obviously important for all buyers, but certainly first-time buyers as well. Because if you think about how the majority of people in Canada purchase a home, it's through the use of a mortgage. And so thinking about what all of your parties would do if you form government, how would you look at mortgage lending policy in Canada, and especially thinking about things like the OSFI mortgage stress test and the potential for longer-term amortization periods? And with that in mind, we'll start with Amanda Rosenstock.
Well, when it comes to mortgages, I mean, our focus is really, like I said before, I mean, it's on investors. I had pointed out earlier, we need to look at what other jurisdictions are doing to make it tougher for investors to purchase single-family homes in order to free up supply and bring costs down for young and middle-income Canadians.
Thank you very much. And now I'll turn to Simon Topp.
Well, like I said, we think that we should be able to have mortgages that last longer for lower payments, right? Fundamentally, one of the reasons people can't afford a house is because A, they can't afford the down payment, and B, they can't afford the monthly hit on their income that comes every time they have to make a payment. So we think that those need to be significantly lower. Otherwise, even if you do create more housing, you don't end up having people being able to move into it. And especially if the housing that is created is not designed to be affordable. We need to invest in that missing middle. We need to allow there to be an option to move into a home that you can actually afford. And we think that longer mortgage terms would help fix that.
Thank you very much. And Ahmed Hassan will give you the last word on mortgages and mortgage lending policy.
Well, we remain committed to helping all Canadians find an affordable place to call home. The issue around lowering mortgage payments and enabling people to be able to afford a down payment, we have addressed that. The Liberal Party in government has addressed that through the first-time home buyer incentive, which is about enabling people to be able to pay the down payment by providing up to 10% of the value of the home in the form of a down payment. We have tweaked that program to better meet the needs of of locations like Toronto, Vancouver, and Victoria that have high housing prices. We are promising to do even further work on the first-time homebuyer incentive. But the first-time homebuyer incentive not only provides folks with that down payment, but it also lowers monthly mortgage payments, which is something that the other parties are talking about doing. We've been doing that for a number of years, and we will continue to always re-examine that program to see how much further we can help Canadians.
Thank you very much. And the final question for this round is it gets back to the topic of specific housing programs. And so do you feel that there are different programs or courses of action that are required to address housing affordability? And for example, I'm thinking of programs like the home buyers tax credit. Is there room for increases or modifications there? But certainly we'd be interested to hear other sort of clear-cut programs that you'd be looking at, either continuing on but changing, or perhaps bringing in something new. So we'll start with Simon Top.
Fundamentally, I think in terms of programs that need to be built, we need to very seriously invest in supply, as we've all been saying. I think we've mentioned a lot of the things that we'd already really like to do. So maybe we can just summarize. Fundamentally, we want to invest in more affordable housing by cutting taxes. We want to encourage co-ops, social housing, and not-for-profit homes. But I think really the big one, because people can't wait to pay their rent and are likely facing homelessness or eviction, is we need people to receive financial aid if they can't afford their rent right now. Now, of course, we can't do that forever, and it's not going to replace the job. But the COVID-19 pandemic has shown is that when you just assist people in a crisis, the crisis can be managed. And we think that home housing is a crisis in this country right now. So that's what we would do, is make sure people don't face eviction and homelessness in one of the richest countries in the world.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hassan?
I believe that, yes, housing supply is one of the ways to improve access to home ownership, but it's not the only way. Yes, supply is important, but so is other supports to ensure affordability. The tax-free savings account will help. Rent-to-own program will help. Programs to address, for example, initiatives to revamp the first-time homebuyer incentive to make it even more relevant to first-time home buyers will help, and making sure that we're providing a mix of housing. It's we should definitely work with particularly municipalities to make sure that we're building all types of housing for different housing needs of Canadians. It can't be a one-size-fits-all, and different Canadians have different housing needs, and government policy has to reflect the diversity of those needs.
Thank you very much. And Amanda Rosenstock, you get the final word on housing programs.
Thank you. Yes. So one thing that really distinguishes the Green Party from the NDP or the Liberals is that we really do want to zero in on the potential of unleashing co-op housing. And that's why we're proposing a national co-op housing strategy. There hasn't been a single co-op built in Toronto since 2010. When I questioned the former Liberal incumbent in my riding, he said, oh, well, we have one application pending in Mississauga. Well, that response is not good enough. The federal government needs to re-engage with cooperative housing stakeholders, including reviewing the financing requirements, because we've heard from stakeholders that even if you want to start a co-op, trying to meet all of the requirements in order to access CMHC financing can be quite onerous. So we need to review the requirements there. We need to put up federal lands and incentivize municipalities to also lease lands for co-op housing like they did prior to the 1990s. We know based on expert reports that cooperative housing is one of the best ways to keep rents affordable over the long term. In some models, it also affords people a pathway to ownership. And once the mortgage is paid off by the housing cooperative, oftentimes they can be self-sustaining and so do not need to be reliant on subsidies over the long term.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate all your comments thus far. And we've touched on a lot of issues impacting the housing market and your party's positions on them. With that in mind, I want to finish off today with a couple of questions on some hot button issues that have been raised more than once and by more than one party during this election. And we'll change up the format a little bit in the sense that we'll give you a minute to respond, and then once we go through each of your responses, you each have an additional 30 seconds to rebut on these next two topics. And I'd like to start today with the notion or election promises that have been made around banning blind bidding during the offer process. At TREB, we believe in consumer choice, and privacy should be paramount in shaping any government policy that deals with the offer process. And so what is the position of your party on the offer process and home transactions that's referred to as blind bidding? Should consumers have a choice on the process and disclosure of their personal information? And so we'll start with Simon Top on this question.
Listen, the thing with blind bidding is that it means that anybody can bid no matter who they are, which means that folks that might need to be viewed by the public, it's a transparency question, right? This is one of the ways that we want to tackle money laundering and giant investors buying up properties so that Canadians can't afford it, right? So we believe that it should be viewable to all who is bidding on these properties. Otherwise, you just have too much money floating around the system, making the housing prices as high as they are. So that's our position on that. And but thank you for the question.
Thank you. And now I'll turn to Amanda Rosenstock on the same issue.
Yes, I know that the other parties, have proposed to take action at the federal level on blind bidding. My understanding is that blind bidding is or bidding is regulated at the provincial level. So I'd like to hear more about how they propose to go about this. But the issue of blind bidding. My fiance and I actually just recently were looking for a condo in downtown Toronto, and we encountered blind bidding. And yes, I think it is. It wastes people's time. It wastes the real estate agent's time. It certainly wasted our time as buyers. And so I would like to see an end to that practice. Look, it isn't, it's just a Band-Aid or it's just a distraction. I would say, from the real overarching issues around speculation and supply and the lack of direct funding to municipalities to re-engage or to provide more housing.
Thank you. And Ahmed Hassan, you have the final word on blind bidding before we go into rebuttals.
Well, we obviously are the only political party. The Liberal Housing Plan is the only plan that bans blind bidding. We obviously want more housing supply. We want more Canadians than ever before to access the dream of home ownership. We want transparency in the process. We believe that there is transparency in other processes for purchasing other consumer products, and buying a home shouldn't be any different. We should know what folks are offering, and blind bidding has led to astronomical increases in housing prices, which has put a lot of pressure on the ability for first-time home buyers to access the dream of home ownership. So we will tackle that. We're the only political party that is introducing a Bill of Rights for potential homeowners. We're banning foreign investment in the real estate market. This is obviously an attempt by our party to make sure that there are there's more transparency and fairness in the process, and we believe it's the right thing to do.
Thank you. And Mr. Top, you went first. So I'll give you the first opportunity to rebut anything you've heard.
Well, I would just add, I think it's a question of the power dynamics between the people selling the homes and the people buying it. People need to be able to compete and see what the different offers are. And if you do that without letting them see it, or if you add too many extra layers to that process, it just makes it unfair for the folks that are trying to get into the housing market.
Thank you. Ms. Rosenstock?
Yeah, I'd like to address the issue of the first-time home buyers incentive. which, data has shown us has been undersubscribed, particularly here in the GTA. And I'd like to know, given that house prices are 15 times the median household income in Toronto, how the first-time homebuyers incentive, which limits the amount of lending to 4.5 times household income, how that is going to help young Canadians and middle-income Canadians in the GTA acquire a home.
Thank you. And Mr. Husson, you have the last opportunity for rebuttal on this topic.
The fact of the matter is, without tackling blind bidding and other measures towards that block transparency, I think it is important to make sure that folks are entering into processes with their eyes open. Transparency can only be good for sellers and buyers, and the entire process, as has been mentioned before, we have to make sure that we know where these purchases and where this money is coming from, because we know that that transparency leads to better outcomes for both buyers and sellers. In addition to that, we know that emphasizing the rights of potential home buyers is something that is much needed in the sector right now. And we are not, we certainly value the work of real estate agents, and we believe they provide a very important essential service, but transparency is needed, and that's what we're doing.
Thank you very much for that. And I think probably the greatest hot button issue that we've heard during this election campaign, and it's certainly one that we've been talking a lot about over the better part of the last half decade, is the topic of foreign investment and foreign buyers in real estate in major centers across the country. And so we'd like each of your party's thoughts and your own thoughts on regulation of foreign investment in real estate. The concerns about the impact on the rental market, and also the impact more broadly on the supply of housing for sale as well. So we'll start with Ahmed Hassan.
We know that foreign investment that views our real estate market as an item on a large portfolio has led to negative outcomes for home buyers. Canadian homes are there to be accessed by Canadians who are accessing and trying to access their dream of home ownership. So we have taken the position that moving forward, a re-elected Liberal government will ban foreign investment in our real estate market for 2 years. And obviously we will see the impacts of that. This is an attempt by us to make sure that more Canadians can and more first-time home buyers can access their dream of home ownership, and we will control REITs. We will tax real estate income trusts more, so that again the negative impacts that they've had on raising rents and leading to rent evictions is dealt with finally, and that's precisely what we're offering to them.
Thank you. And I'll turn it over now to Amanda Rosenstock on foreign buying.
Yeah, so, I don't think that the Liberals have absolutely any credibility on this issue. I mean, in their budget 2021 announcement, they announced, a measly 1% tax on non-resident property owners, which by most expert accounts that I've heard would just be the cost of doing business and do nothing really to quell the dramatic growth in house prices that we've seen across the country. And they only announced a ban on foreign owners once the Conservatives announced it. So, I just don't think that they can be trusted when it comes to this issue whatsoever. Now, the reality is that perhaps, banning foreign owners is something that it's time to put on the table. But again, we've seen data come out of New Zealand. They took the same approach. They've banned foreign buyers from being able to purchase detached homes. Australia's done it to some extent as well. And that hasn't, I was just going to say that hasn't on its own been enough to quell the dramatic growth in house prices in those countries.
Thank you. And Mr. Top, you get the final word on foreign buying before we turn to rebuttals on this final question.
Yeah, I would say that, foreign buying is definitely a big source of why housing is so expensive, but it's not the only thing. And like Amanda said, banning it won't immediately solve it. In fact, I think there's probably an even higher, at least equally, or at the very minimum, close issue, which is that people are buying houses and flipping them for far more expensive than they used to be, like a certain Liberal candidate. We believe in implementing a 20% foreign buyers tax on foreign buyers. We believe that will help curb it, but also fundamentally, we want to deal with money laundering. Like I said earlier, we need to have transparency in these transactions so that we can catch sort of shady deals and make sure that they don't contribute to the housing prices in this country, and so that organized crime doesn't benefit off of the unaffordability of the Canadian housing market.
Thank you very much. And I'll turn it back to Mr. Huston. You have 30 seconds if you'd like to rebut anything you've heard.
Yes, I would point to the fact that we are the ones who will end foreign buyers investing in our real estate sector. We're going to stop the harmful practice for rent evictions. We're going to tax big real estate investment companies. We're going to limit house flipping, and we will establish the first ever housing bill of rights that will make buying a home fair, open, and a transparent process. And our record speaks for itself. We are determined to make sure that more Canadians than ever before have access to their dream of home ownership.
Thank you very much. And now to Amanda Rosenstock for any final rebuttal on that.
Yeah, I don't understand how the Liberals can claim that the record speaks for itself. House prices have gone up 83% since they took power. They've had 6 years to deal with the housing crisis. In fact, Chrystia Freeland was bringing this issue to the floor in Parliament when Stephen Harper was in office. And even when the Liberals won their election in 2015, they didn't take action. So they knew about this long ago. And, I think time's up and Canadians aren't being fooled anymore.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Top, final rebuttal.
I think Canadians have come to be suspicious of Liberal promises during election season. There are many things that are promised, such as things like electoral reform, like pharmacare, that are promised on the stump and then fail to materialize. And like has been mentioned, I think the Liberals have had 6 years to deal with this issue, and housing prices have almost doubled. So I don't think that really they're particularly trustworthy on this issue.
Thank you very much, and we're almost at time today. So what I'd like to do is give each candidate 90 seconds to give any concluding thoughts on how their party's platform will deal with the various issues associated with housing that we've discussed today. And what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Mr. Top first for 90 seconds.
Well, I'd just like to conclude that a lot has been said here about what can be done about affordable housing in this country. The thing is that everything that's been proposed by the Liberals and the Conservatives, though I sure wish they turned up, are things that could have been done during their many years in power, which shows you just how seriously they take this crisis, despite their nice words and their big promises. Affordable housing has been a crisis in this country long before this unnecessary election was called, and it will continue to be a problem for as long as we neglect to take it seriously. An NDP government will help renters by waiving federal taxes for those who build affordable housing, as well as provide immediate financial relief for those struggling to afford rent and can't wait for years to have somewhere to live. We will create startup funds for housing co-ops, social housing, and not-for-profit housing. We will help first-time home buyers by doubling the first-time home buyers tax credit and allow for lower mortgage terms for CMHC insured contracts. That will allow for smaller monthly payments. Also, we will heavily tax foreign buyers and crack down on money laundering so people don't have to compete with massive investment firms and shady money when bidding on a house. Fundamentally, what we offer is a shift in attitude. We believe the point of government is to make sure people have a good standard of living in one of the richest countries in the world. There should not be people experiencing homelessness here. People should not be evicted from their homes during a pandemic. People should not have to spend huge portions of their income just to have a place to stay. That is what an NDP government offers, and what I promise to do as an MP in Ottawa. We will be a government that always fights for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll turn to Amanda Rosenstock for 90 seconds of concluding thoughts.
Thank you. If you're a young Canadian who's just starting out, or you're a middle income earner, know that the Green Party hears you and understands your frustrations. We're the only party that is willing to address the main drivers of the housing crisis, and it's the fact that we live in a society where homes are treated as commodities. So many of us voted for the Liberals in 2015, hoping they would offer progressive change. Well, after 6 years of inaction and countless broken promises, we know we can't rely on them to make life more affordable or more sustainable. And the Conservatives and the NDP's plans fall well short of what is needed. It's time for a change. If you want a real progressive voice in Parliament and a party that will actually do what needs to be done to make Canadians' lives better, I urge you to vote Green. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And over to Ahmed Hassan for your final 90-second concluding thoughts.
Thank you very much. We're the only political party that has demonstrated action on both on housing supply, on housing affordability, and on fairness and rights for potential homeowners. Through the National Housing Strategy, we've built the most amount of housing, the most amount of affordable housing, affordable rental housing, deeply affordable housing, as well as addressing the homelessness crisis. More than any other political party. We're the only political party that has a fully costed plan for housing, and our Liberal housing plan will address affordability challenges faced by Canadians, supply challenges faced by Canadians, and fairness and rights for potential home buyers. On affordability, we will introduce an innovative rent-to-own program and a first-time home buyer. We'll revamp the first-time home buyer incentive and introduce a first-time tax-free savings account to the tune of $40,000. On supply, we will put $40 billion on the table to increase supply in partnership with municipalities and other orders of government and communities. On fairness, we will eliminate investment in the foreign. We will eliminate foreign investment in the real estate market for 2 years and ban blind bidding, as well as limit flipping of new homes. Our plan is fully costed. The other parties' plans are not costed at all, and they're not as ambitious or aggressive or comprehensive as the Liberal plan for housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank all of our participants today for speaking with us on this important issue of housing, which I know has become an important pillar of all of your platforms. So again, we know it's a busy time as you move through the election process, and so we appreciate you taking an hour out of your time. And thank you to everyone who tuned in today's podcast episode as well. Please don't forget to cast your vote in the federal election on September 20th. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for us. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast on SoundCloud, Apple, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media and visit our website, treb.ca. That's TRREB.ca to find market insights and more. This has been another episode of Ready to Real Estate, and thank you for tuning in.